All glories to Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. All glories to Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Madhya Lila, Chapter 10, Text 161. Charmambara Chadi Brahma Nanda Padila Vashana Prabhuvasi Kaila Tandra Charana Vandana. Translation. As soon as Brahmananda Bharati gave up his deerskin and covered himself with sannyasi robes, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and offered his respects at his lotus feet. Text 162. Bharati kahi tomara achara loka shikate kunana kari benati vaya panachite. Translation. Brahmananda Bharati said, "You instruct the general populace by your behavior. I will not do anything against your wishes. Otherwise you will not offer me respects but will neglect me. I am afraid of this." Text 163. Sampratika dui brahma ihankala chala Jagannatha chala brahma kumita sachala. Translation. At the present moment I see two Brahmins. One Brahmin is Lord Jagannath, who does not move, and the other Brahmin who is moving is you. Lord Jagannath is Archa Vigraha, the worshipable deity, and it is he who is the non-moving Brahman. However, you are Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and you are moving here and there. Both of you are the same Brahman, master of material nature, but you are playing two parts, one moving and one not moving. In this way, two Brahmans are now residing at Jagannath Puri, Purushotama. Text 164. Tumi Gora Varna Tinha Shamala Varna Lui Brahme Kaila Sabha Jagatarana. Translation. Of the two Brahmins, you are fair complexioned, and the other, Lord Jagannath, is blackish. However, both of you are delivering the whole world. Text 165. Prabhu kahi satya kahi tumara agamane Tui Brahma prakatila Sri Purushotame. Translation. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied, "Actually, to tell you the truth, due to your presence there are now two Brahmans at Jagannath Puri." Text 166. Brahmananda Namatumi Gura Brahmachala Shamavarna Jagannatha Vaishiyachena Achala. Translation. Both Brahmananda and Gaurahari are moving, whereas the blackish Lord Jagannath is sitting tight and immobile. Purport. Brahmananda Bharati wanted to prove that there is no difference between the Supreme Lord and the Jiva, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to prove that he and Brahmananda Bharati were Jivas. Though the Jivas are Brahman, they are many, but the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Brahman, is one. On the other hand, Brahmananda Bharati wanted to prove that Jagannath and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are one, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But to fulfill his mission, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared to be moving, whereas Lord Jagannath appeared to be inert. However, both of them are one and the same. Thus, this jolly argument was going on. Finally, Brahmananda Bharati referred the whole matter to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya for a final decision. Text 167. Bharati kahe Sarvabhauma Madhyastahana Hara Sane Amara Nyaya Bhuja Manadiya. Translation. Brahmananda Bharati said, "My dear Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, please become the mediator in this logical argument between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and me." Text 168. Vyapya vyapaka bhave jiva brahme jani jiva Vyapya Brahma Vyapaka Shastrete Vakani. Translation. Brahmananda Bharati continued, the living entity is localized, whereas the Supreme Brahman is all-pervading. That is the verdict of the revealed scriptures. Purport. Ramananda Bharati drew Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's attention because he wanted him to judge the argument. He then stated that Brahman, the Supreme Lord, is all-pervading. This is confirmed by Bhagavad Gita. Kshetrajnanam kapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra jayor janam yataj janam matam mama. O scion of Bharata, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies, and to understand this body and its owner is called knowledge. That is my opinion. Bhagavad Gita 13.3. The Supreme Personality of Godhead and his Paramatma feature is expanded everywhere. The Brahma Samhita says, Andantarasta Paramanu Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam. By virtue of his all-pervasive nature, the Supreme Lord is within the universe as well as within all elements of the universe. He is even within the atom. In this way, the Supreme Lord Govinda is all-pervasive. On the other hand, the living entities are very, very small. It is said that the living entity is 1/10,000th of a tip of hair. Therefore, the living entity is localized. Living entities rest on the Brahman effulgence, the bodily rays of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 169. Charma gucha nakaila amare sodhana Dunhara vyapya vyapakate eita karana. Translation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu purified me by taking away my deerskin. This is proof that he is all-pervasive and all-powerful, and that I am subordinate to him. Purport. Brahmananda Bharati herein asserts that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Brahman, and that he is the subordinate Brahman. This is confirmed in the Vedas. Vicho Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitanam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is Brahman, or Param Brahman, the chief of all living entities. Both the Supreme Brahman, or the Personality of Godhead, and the living entities are persons, but the Supreme Brahman is the predominator, whereas the living entities are predominated. Text 170. Suvarna Varno Hemango Varnagas Chandanan Gadi Sanyasa Krich Chama Santo Nista Shanti Parayana. Translation. His bodily hue is golden, and his whole body is like molten gold. Every part of his body is very beautifully constructed and smeared with sandalwood pulp. Accepting the renounced order, the Lord is always equipoised. He is firmly fixed on his mission of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, and he is firmly situated in his dualistic conclusion and his peace. Purport. This is a quote from Mahabharata, Vishnu Sahasranam Shrota. Text 171. Ehi Saba Namera Inha Haya Nijaspada Chandataka Chandan Akta Prashada Dura Shri Bhuje Angara. Translation. All the symptoms mentioned in the verse from Vishnu Sahasranama Stota are visible in the body of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. His arms are decorated with ornamental bangles made of sandalwood pulp, and with the thread received from Sri Jagannath deity. Text 172. Bhattacharya kahe Dwarati dekhe tomara jaya Prabhu kahe yei kaha sei satyahaya. Translation. After hearing this, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya rendered his judgment, saying, Brahmananda Bharati, I see that you are victorious. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately said, I accept whatever Brahmananda Bharati has said. It is quite all right with me. Text 173. Guru Sishya Nyaya Satya Shishyera Parajaya Parati Kahe Eho Nahe Anyahe Tuhaya. Translation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu thus posed himself as a disciple and accepted Brahmananda Bharati as his spiritual master. He then said, the disciple is certainly defeated in an argument with the spiritual master. Brahmananda Bharati immediately countered these words, saying, this is not the cause of your defeat. There is another cause. Text 174. Bhaktatani haratumi etomara svabhava hara ekasunatumi apana prabhava. Translation. This is your natural characteristic. You accept defeat at the hands of your devotee. There is also another glory of yours, which I ask you to hear attentively. Text 175. Ajanma karinu muni nirakara dhyana tomadeki Krishna haila mora vidyamana. Translation. I have been meditating on the impersonal Brahman since my birth, but since I have seen you, I have fully experienced Krishna. Purport. Brahmananda Bharati admitted that when there is an argument between the spiritual master and the disciple, the spiritual master is naturally victorious, although the disciple may put forward a strong argument. In other words, it is customary that the words of the spiritual master are more worshipable than the words of a disciple. Under the circumstances, since Brahmananda Bharati was in the position of a spiritual master, he emerged victorious over Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who considered himself Brahmananda Bharati's disciple. However, Brahmananda Bharati reversed the argument and took the position of a devotee, admitting that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. This means that the Lord is voluntarily defeated out of affection for his devotee. He was defeated voluntarily because no one can defeat the Supreme Lord. Concerning this, the words of Bhisma in Srimad Bhagavatam are important. Svanigamam apaya mat pratijanam ratam adi karutam avapluto ratastaha vrta vrata charano vyachak chaladgur hadir iva hansam ibham gato taraya. Fulfilling my desire and sacrificing his own promise, he got down from the chariot, took up its wheel, and ran toward me hurriedly, just as a lion goes to kill an elephant. He even dropped his outer garment on the way. Bhagavatam 1.9.37. Krishna promised not to fight in the battle of Kurukshetra, but in order to break Krishna's promise, Bhisma attacked Arjuna in such a vigorous way that Krishna was obliged to take up the chariot wheel and attack Bhisma. The Lord did this to show that his devotee was being maintained at the sacrifice of his own promise. Brahmananda Bharati said, since the beginning of my life, I was attached to impersonal Brahman, realization. But as soon as I saw you, I became very much attached to the personality of Godhead, Krishna. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Lord Krishna himself, and thus Brahmananda Bharati became his devotee. Text 176. Krishna nama smure mukhe mane netre Krishna tomake tarupa dekhi hridaya sas Krishna. Translation. Brahmananda Bharati continued, since I have seen you, I have been feeling Lord Krishna's presence in my mind and have been seeing him before my eyes. I now want to chant the holy name of Lord Krishna. Over and above this, within my heart I consider you to be Krishna, and I am therefore very eager to serve you. Text 177. Bilva mangala kaila yeche dasa apanara ihande ki sehi dasa haila amara. Translation. Bilva Mangala Thakur abandoned his impersonal realization for the realization of the personality of Godhead, and now see that my condition is similar to his, for it has already changed. In his early life, Bilva Mangala Thakur was an impersonalist monist, and he used to meditate upon the impersonal Brahman effulgence. Later he became a devotee of Lord Krishna, and his explanation for this change is given in verse text 178. That is quoted from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Gradually, one comes to the stage of Bhagavan realization of the Supreme Person, after having attained the lower stages of realization, impersonal Brahman realization and localized Paramatma realization. This is described in Chaitanya Charitamrta 5 by Prabodhananda Saraswati. Kevalyam narakayate tridasa purakasha pushpayate Durdhante Diya Kala Sarpa Patali Prokata Damsrayate Vishvam Purna Sukhayate Vidhi Mahendradiyas Chakitayate Yat Karunya Katkasha Baba Vitam Tam Guram Evastama. Kaivalya, oneness in the effulgence of Brahman, appears hellish to the devotee. The heavenly planets, the abodes of the demigods, appear to a devotee like phantasmagoria. The yogis meditate for sense control, but for the devotee, the senses appear like serpents with broken teeth. The devotee doesn't have to control his senses, for his senses are already engaged in the Lord's service. Consequently, there is no possibility that the senses will act like serpents. In the material condition, the senses are as strong as poisonous snakes. When the teeth are broken, the snake is no longer dangerous. The entire world is a replica of Vaikuntha for the devotee because he has no anxiety. He sees that everything belongs to Krishna, and he does not want to enjoy anything for himself. He does not even aspire for the position of Lord Brahma or Indra. He simply wants to engage everything in the service of the Lord. Therefore, he has no problem. He stands in his original constitutional position. All this is possible when one receives Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's merciful glance. In the Chaitanya Charitamrta, there are many more verses illustrating the same principle. Dikorvati cha Brahma yoga vidushas tam gora chandram numa. Tavad Brahma kata vimukta padavi tavana tikti bhavet. Tavak chapi Vishnukalhatvam ayate no loka vedhastiti. Tabak shastra viramiti kala kalo nana bahir vartmasu. Sri Chaitanya Padam Bhuja Priya Jano Yavana Dig Gochara. Goras Chara Sakala Maharat Ko Pi Me Tivra Virya. A discussion of the impersonal Brahman is not very palatable to a devotee. The so-called regulations of the Shastras also appear null and void to him. There are many people who argue over the Shastras, but for a devotee, such discussions are but tumultuous roaring. By the influence of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all these problems disappear. Text 178. Advaita Viti Pati Kair Upasya Swananda Simhasana Labda Diksha Satena kenapi vayam hatena rasikrita gopa varu vitena. Translation. Brahmananda Bharati concluded, although I was worshipped by those on the path of monism and initiated into self-realization through the yoga system, I am nonetheless forcibly turned into a maidservant by some cunning boy who is always joking with the gopis. Purport. This is a verse written by Bilva Mangala Thakur. It is found in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 3.1.44. Text 179. Prabhu kahe Krishne tomara gadha prema haya yahan netra pade tehan Shri Krishna swaraya. Translation. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied, you have a deep ecstatic love for Krishna. Therefore, whenever your eyes turn, you simply heighten your Krishna consciousness. Text 180. Vatacharya kahe donhara shushtaya vachana ageyadi Krishna dena sakshat darashana. Translation. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, both your statements are correct. Krishna gives direct audience through his own mercy. Text 181. Prema vina kabuna he tandra sakshatkara inhara kripate hoya darashan inhara. Translation. Without having ecstatic love for Krishna, one cannot see him directly. Therefore, through the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Brahmananda Bharati has acquired direct vision of the Lord. Purport. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, you are Brahmananda Bharati, an advanced devotee who ecstatically loves the Supreme Lord. Therefore, you see Krishna everywhere, and there is no doubt about it. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was a mediator between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Brahmananda Bharati, and his judgment was that an advanced devotee like Brahmananda Bharati sees Krishna by Krishna's mercy. Krishna directly presents himself before the vision of an advanced devotee. Since Brahmananda Bharati was an advanced devotee, he saw Krishna in the person of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In the words of Brahma Samhita 5.38, Premanjana Chorita Bhakti Vilochanena Shanta Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Sham Sundaram Achintya Gunasvarupam Govindam Maripurusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship the primeval Lord Govinda, who is always seen by the devotee, whose eyes are anointed with the pulp of love. He is seen in his eternal form of Sham Sundara, situated within the heart of the devotee. Text 182. Prabhu kahe Vishnu Vishnu ki kaha sarvam bhoma atishtuti haya ehi nindara lakshana. Translation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, what are you saying? Lord Vishnu, save me. Such glorification is simply another form of blasphemy. Purport. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a little embarrassed by Bhattacharya's statement. Therefore, he uttered the name Vishnu to save himself. The Lord herein confirms that if one is overestimated, glorification is just another form of blasphemy. In this way, he protests this so-called offensive statement. Text 183. Etabali Bahartire Lananija Vasaila Bharati Goshani Prabhura Nikate Rahila. Translation. After saying this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took Brahmananda Bharati with him to his residence. From that time on, Brahmananda Bharati remained with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 184. Brahmabhadra Charya Ara Bhagavan Acharya Prabhupade Rahile Dunhe Chadi Sarva Karya. Translation. Later, Brahmabhadra Acharya and Bhagavan Acharya also joined them, and giving up all other responsibilities, remained under Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's shelter. Text 185. Kashishvara Goshani Aila Aradine Samana Kariya Prabhu Rakaila Nijastane. Translation. The next day, Kashishvara Goshani also came and remained with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who received him with great respect. Text 186. Prabhu ke lana karana isvara darshana akeloka vidasabha kari nivarana. Translation. Kashishvara used to usher Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu into the Jagannath temple. He would precede the Lord into the crowd and keep the people from touching him. Text 187. Yatha nada nadiyeche samudre milaya Arche Mahaprabhura Bhakta Yahanta Hanhaya. Translation. As all the rivers flow into the sea, all the devotees throughout the country finally came to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's shelter. Text 188. Sabheyasi Milila Prabhura Sri Charane Prabhuda Kripa Kari Sabhaya Rakila Nijastane. Translation. Since all the devotees came to him for shelter, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed them all mercy and kept them under his protection. Text 189. Ehita Kahila Prabhura Vaishnava Milana Ihaye Sunepaya Chaitanya Charana. Translation. Thus I have described the meeting of all the Vaishnavas with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Whoever hears this description ultimately attains his shelter. Text 190. Shri Rupa Raghunatha Padeyara Asa Chaitanya Charitamrta Kahe Krishna Dasa. Translation. Praying at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath, always desiring their mercy, I, Krishna Das, narrate Sri Chaitanya Charitamrta, following in their footsteps. Thus end the Bhakti-vedanta purports to the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrta Madhya Lila, 10th chapter, describing the Lord's meeting the Vaishnavas upon his return to Jagannath Puri from South India. Chapter 11. The Veda Kirtana Pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Bhakti Vinod Thakur summarizes the 11th chapter in his Amrita Pravaha Bhasya. When Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya tried his best to arrange a meeting between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and King Prataparudra, the Lord flatly denied his request. At this time, Sri Ramananda Roy returned from his governmental post, and he praised King Prataparudra highly in Lord Chaitanya's presence. Because of this, the Lord became a little soft. The king also made promises to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who hinted how the king might meet the Lord. During Anavasara, while Lord Jagannath was resting for 15 days, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, being unable to see Lord Jagannath, went to Alalanath. Later, when the devotees from Bengal came to see him, he returned to Jagannath Puri. While Advaita Acharya and the other devotees were coming to Jagannath Puri, Swarup Damodar and Govinda, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's two personal assistants, went to receive all the devotees with garlands. From the roof of his palace, King Prataparudra could see all the devotees arriving. Gopinath Acharya stood on the roof with the king, and following Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's instructions, identified each and every devotee. The king discussed the devotees with Gopinath Acharya, and he mentioned that the devotees were accepting prasad without observing the regulative principles governing pilgrimages. They accepted prasad without having shaved, and they neglected to fast in a holy place. Nonetheless, the king arranged residential quarters for all the devotees and saw to their prasad. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu talked very happily with Vasudev Datta and other devotees. Haridas Thakur also came, and due to his humble and submissive attitude, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave him a nice solitary place near the temple. After this, the Lord began performing Sankirtana, dividing all the devotees into 4 divisions. After Sankirtana, all the devotees left for their residential quarters. Text 1. Atyutandam Tandavam Gora Chandra Purvan Bhaktitai Shri Jagannath Dehe Nana Bhavalan Kritanga Svadamna Chakre Vishwam Prema Vanya Nimagnam. Translation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu merged the entire world into the ocean of ecstatic love by performing his beautiful dances within the temples of Jagannath. He danced exquisitely and jumped high. Text 2. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda. Translation. All glories to Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. All glories to Lord Nityananda Prabhu. All glories to Sri Advaita Prabhu. And all glories to the devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 3. Aladina Sarvambhoma Kahe Prabhu Stane Abhaya Dana Dehayari Kari Nevedane. Translation. The next day, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya requested Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to give him permission to submit a statement without fear. Text 4. Prabhu kahe kaha tumi nahi kichu bhaya. Yogya haile kariba, ayogya haile naya. Translation: The Lord gave the Bhattacharya assurance that he could speak without fear, but added that if his statement were suitable, he would accept it, and if it were not, he would reject it. Text 5. Sarvam Bhoma Kahe Ei Prataparudra Raya Utkanta Hanchae Toma Mili Bare Chaya. Translation: Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, "There is a king named Prataparudra Roy. He is very anxious to meet you, and he wants your permission." Text 6. Karne hasta Jaya Prabhu Smare Narayana Sarvabhauma Kahe Kena Ayogya Vachana. Translation: As soon as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard this proposal, he immediately covered his ears with his hands and said, "My dear Sarvabhauma, why are you requesting such an undesirable thing from me?" Text 7. Virakta Sanyasi Amara Raja Darashana Stri Darashana Sama Vish Era Bhakshana. Translation: Since I am in the renounced order, it is dangerous for me to meet a king as to meet a woman. They are both just like drinking poison. Text 8. Nishkinchanyasya Bhagavad Bhajano Mukasya Param Param Jagamisur Bhava Sagrasya Sandarshanam Vishayinam Ata Yoshitam Cha Hahanta Hanta Visha Bhakshanato Pi Asadhu. Translation: Greatly lamenting, the Lord then informed Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, "Alas, for a person who is seriously desiring to cross the material ocean and engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord without material motives, seeing a materialist engaged in sense gratification and seeing a woman who is similarly interested is more abominable than drinking poison willingly." Purport: This is a quotation from Sri Chaitanya Chandrodaya Nataka 8.23. Thus, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu enunciates the principles for a sannyasi renouncing the material world for spiritual advancement. Spiritual advancement is not meant for magic shows and jugglery, but for crossing the material world and being transferred to the spiritual world. Param Param Jagamisho means desiring to go to the other side of the material world. There is a river called the Vaitarani, and on this one side of this river is the material world, and on the other side is the spiritual world. Since the Vaitarani river is compared to a great ocean, it is named Bhava Sagara, the ocean of repeated birth and death. Spiritual life aims at stopping this repetition of birth and death and entering into the spiritual world where one can live eternally, cognizant and blissful. Unfortunately, the general populace does not know anything about spiritual life or the spiritual world. The spiritual world is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita 8.20. Paras tasmatu bhavo nyo yakto vyakat sanatana yasa sarveshu bhuteshu nasyatsu na vinashati. Yet there is another nature which is eternal and is transcendental to this manifested and unmanifested matter. It is supreme and it is never annihilated. When all in this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. Thus, there is a spiritual nature beyond this material world, and that spiritual nature exists eternally. Spiritual advancement means stopping material activities and entering into spiritual activities. This is the process of Bhakti Yoga. In the material world, the via media for sense gratification is mainly a woman. One who is seriously interested in spiritual life should strictly avoid women. A sannyasi should never see a man or a woman for material benefit. In addition, talks with materialistic men and women are also dangerous, and they are compared to drinking poison. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very strict on this point. He therefore refused to see King Prataparudra, who was naturally always engaged in politic and economic affairs. The Lord even refused to see the king, despite the request of a personality like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who was the Lord's intimate friend and devotee. Text 9. Sarvabhauma kahe satya tomara bachana jagannatha sevakaraja kintu bhakto tama. Translation. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya replied, "My dear Lord, what you have said is correct, but this king is not an ordinary king. He is a great devotee and servant of Lord Jagannath." Text 10. Prabhu kahe tatapi raja kala sarpakara kastanadi sparshe yarche upaje vikara. Translation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, although it is correct that the king is a great devotee, he is still to be considered a venomous snake. Similarly, even though a woman be made of wood, one becomes agitated simply by touching her form. Purport. Sri Chanakya Pandit, in his moral instructions, has stated, Chaja Durjana Samsargam Bhaja Sadhu Samagramam. This means that one has to abandon the association of materialistic people and associate with spiritually advanced people. However qualified a materialist may be, he is no better than a venomous serpent. Everyone knows that a snake is dangerous and poisonous, and when its hood is decorated with jewels, it is no less poisonous or dangerous. However qualified a materialist may be, he is no better than a snake decorated with jewels. One should therefore be careful in dealing with such materialists, just as one would be careful in dealing with a bejeweled serpent. Even though a woman be made of wood or stone, she becomes attractive when decorated. When one becomes sexually agitated even by touching the form. Therefore, one should not trust his mind, which is so fickle that it can give way to enemies at any moment. The mind is always accompanied by the 6 enemies, namely Kama, Krodha, Madha, Moha, Matsarya, and Bhaya. That is lust, anger, intoxication, delusion, envy, and fear. Although the mind may be merged in spiritual consciousness, one should always be careful in dealing with it, just as one is careful in dealing with a snake. One should never think that his mind is trained and that he can do whatever he likes. One interested in spiritual life should always engage his mind in the service of the Lord, so that the enemies of the mind, who always accompany the mind, will be subdued. If the mind is not engaged in Krishna consciousness at every moment, there is a chance that it will give way to its enemies. In this way, we become victims of the mind. Chanting the Hare Krishna mantra engages the mind at the lotus feet of Krishna constantly. Thus, the mind's enemies do not have a chance to strike. Following Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's example, in these verses, we should be very careful in dealing with the mind. We should not be indulged in any circumstance. Once we indulge the mind, it can create havoc in this life, even though we may be spiritually advanced. The mind is specifically agitated through the association of materialistic men and women. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, through his personal behavior, warns everyone to avoid meeting a materialistic person or a woman. Text 11. Akaradapi vethavyam strinam vishinam api yathaher manasak shobas tata tasya kruterapi. Translation. Just as one is immediately frightened upon seeing a live serpent or even the form of a serpent, one endeavoring for self-realization should similarly fear a materialistic person and a woman. Indeed, he should not even glance at their bodily features. Purport. This is a quotation from Sri Chaitanya Chandrodaya, Nataka, 8.2.4. 8.24. Text 12. Archivata punarapi mukena anive kahaya ditabe amaya etana dekive. Translation. Bhattacharya, if you continue to speak like this, you will never see me here again. Therefore, you should never let such a request come from your mouth. Text 13. Mayapana sarvamboma nijagare gela vasaya giya bhattacharya chintita haila. Being afraid, translation, being afraid, Sarvabhauma returned home and began to meditate on the matter. Text 14. Hinakale prataparudra purushottamaila patra mitra sange raja darashane chalila. Translation. At this time, Maharaj Prataparudra arrived at Jagannath Puri, Purushottama, and accompanied by his secretaries, ministers, and military officers, went to visit the temple of Lord Jagannath. Purport. It appears that Maharaj Prataparudra used to live at Kataka, his capital. Later, he is shifted to his capital, to Khurda, a few miles from Jagannath Puri. Presently, there is a railway station there called Khurda Road. Text 15. Ramananda Raya Aila Gajapati Sange Pratamai Prabhudeyasi Milila Bahurange. Translation. When King Prataparudra returned to Jagannath Puri, Ramananda Roy also came with him. Ramananda Roy immediately went to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with great pleasure. Purport. All Indian kings are given titles. Sometimes they are known as Chhatrapati, sometimes Narapati, and sometimes Asvapati. The king of Orissa is addressed as Gajapati. Thus ends our reading for today. All glories to Sripad Bhakti Madhava Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to Om Vishnupad Bhakti Nirmalachari Maharaj Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
Jai.